You paid for the seat. You checked in early. You did everything right, and the plane still leaves without you. That seat was never really yours. And by the end, you will understand why a doctor got dragged screaming down an aisle over the exact same math. Remember him. Airlines deliberately sell more tickets than they have seats, on purpose, on nearly every single flight you have ever taken. It sounds like greed. Pure, cackling, top hat and monocle corporate greed. And for about 60 years, basically everyone assumed exactly that. Here is the part that ruins the villain story. An economist actually proved this makes your flights cheaper. So how does selling one seat twice somehow save you money? Keep your eye on the empty seat. It is the whole plot. Because here is the uncomfortable truth. The seat you paid for isn't really yours until you are buckled into it. Until that moment, it is just a promise. And promises, as we will see, are negotiable. To understand why any of this exists, we have to rewind to a much, much emptier airplane. It's the late 1940s. Air travel is booming, and airlines have discovered a very expensive new enemy: the no-show. People booked seats and then simply didn't come. On a typical flight, 5 to 15% of them just vanished. And an empty seat on a departed plane is worth exactly nothing. You cannot sell it at 30,000 feet. Every no-show was money the airline could never, ever get back. It was quietly bleeding them dry. Back then, seat counts were tracked by hand. Clerks with paper, pencils, and a genuinely heroic amount of coffee. And where there are humans counting by hand, there are mistakes. Somebody, somewhere, oversold a flight. And here is the accident that changed everything. The oversold plane left completely full. For once, nobody lost money. The no-shows and the extra tickets had canceled each other out. It was a mistake that made money. Airlines noticed, and a clerical error slowly, quietly turned into a strategy. But there was one ugly problem they hadn't solved. What happens when everybody actually shows up? Somebody was going to get bumped. And in those days, they picked that someone at random. It was about to get personal. Enter the 1960s and an economist named Julian Simon, who looked at random bumping and said, "This is insane. Why drag off some random terrified person," he asked, "when somebody on this plane would happily leave for the right price?" His idea was almost embarrassingly simple. Hold an auction. Ask who will give up their seat and for how much. Let the travelers name their price. The person who least wants to fly leaves and gets paid. Everybody wins. The airline industry heard this elegant, fair, brilliant solution and told him to get lost. So Simon's plan sat forgotten in a drawer, and the industry kept bumping people at random forever. The end. Except no. Because a few years later, the numbers were too good to ignore, and airlines quietly stole his homework. The voluntary bumping auction became the standard everywhere. That is why they now ask for volunteers at the gate. Then came the ultimate validation. Milton Friedman himself praised the idea in the foreword to Simon's own book. One estimate later credited the voluntary bumping system with adding roughly $100 billion to the economy. $100 billion. From an idea people once laughed out of the room. But an auction only works if the airline knows how many seats to oversell in the first place. Enter the machine. After deregulation in 1978, American Airlines boss Robert Crandall built a data engine to squeeze every seat for profit. He named the whole practice yield management, which is a corporate way of saying, know exactly how badly you want to fly. Today, that machine is an AI. It studies your booking history, your route, the season, the time you fly, all of it. And it is very good at spotting one particular animal: the business traveler. Business flyers skip flights constantly. A couple heading home from a long weekend almost never does. So let me show you what you actually look like to that machine, because it is not flattering. It's Tuesday. You booked at 6 in the morning, half asleep, One carry-on, aisle seat, flying solo. You feel like a person with plans. To the machine, you are not a person. You are a 71% chance of showing up. That's it. That's all you are. And based on that number, right now, before you have even packed, it just sold your seat to someone else. You are not a passenger. You are a probability wearing a boarding pass. Now, all of this quietly betting on you was perfectly legal, mostly because they never told you they were doing it. Until one very famous, very annoyed passenger got bumped and decided to sue. The passenger was Ralph Nader, professional thorn in the side of large corporations everywhere. Nader had booked a flight, shown up, and been bumped. And he did not respond by writing a stern letter. His case climbed all the way to the Supreme Court in 1976. The charge? Fraudulent misrepresentation. His point was simple. The airline knowingly oversold and never once mentioned it. That is basically a secret trapdoor. And he won the right to sue over it. Suddenly, overbooking had to come out of the shadows. Over the years, the rules got teeth. Today, if you are involuntarily bumped and delayed, they owe you money. Up to 4 times your one-way fare, capped at just over $2,000. Your seat now has an official price tag. So the math was elegant. The rules were written. Everybody had a number. What could possibly go wrong? And then came a Sunday evening in Chicago, and one man who looked at all that beautiful math and said no. April 9th, 2017, United Express Flight 3411, Chicago to Louisville. Fully boarded and overbooked. At the last second, the airline needed 4 seats back, not for paying customers, for 4 crew members. They asked for volunteers, the auction Julian Simon dreamed up. But nobody took the offer that night. So the computer picked. And it picked Dr. David Dow, a 69-year-old physician who needed to see patients the next morning. He said no. He had paid, he was seated, he had somewhere to be. A completely reasonable human answer. This is the exact moment the elegant math ran headfirst into human dignity. And the math did not win gracefully. Officers came aboard. They dragged a paying, seated doctor down the aisle by his arms, and according to his attorney, he lost 2 teeth, broke his nose, and suffered a concussion. 90 seconds of that video went around the entire planet before the plane even reached Louisville. 60 years of quiet, invisible math had just become the most visible thing in aviation, and United was about to panic. The backlash was instant and enormous, and it did something outrage rarely does. It actually changed the rules. United raised its maximum bump payout to $10,000 and swore off dragging seated passengers, ever. Delta had already bumped its cap toward $10,000 too, up from a measly $1,300. Suddenly, your seat was gold. And here is the reframe that changes the whole story. The system, most of the time, quietly works. Denied boardings, voluntary and involuntary combined, are less than 1% of all passengers. And nearly all of those happily took the cash. Being forced off against your will? Recently, about 1 in 40,000 flyers. You are wildly more likely to lose your luggage. Here is a real terminal for reference. Thousands of seats, sold and resold by an algorithm, and almost everyone flies. That accidental clerk's error from the 1950s is the reason your ticket is cheaper today than it has any right to be. So remember you, at the gate, ticket paid, done everything right? That seat was never really yours. It was a probability wearing a boarding pass, and the reason you almost always get on anyway is a 60-year-old idea that quietly makes flying cheaper. Sometimes the villain is math. Subscribe or don't, but the algorithm already knows there's a 71% chance you will.